Imagine a city so wealthy, so dazzling, that travelers from distant lands described its markets as overflowing with silks, spices, and jewels. A city where scholars debated philosophy under golden domes, where astronomers mapped the heavens, and where poets recited verses that echoed across the Islamic world. That city was Baghdad, the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, once called the City of Peace. But in the winter of 1258, that jewel would be reduced to rubble and ashes, and its rivers would run black with ink and red with blood. The Mongols, the fiercest horsemen the world had ever seen, descended upon Baghdad, and in just a matter of weeks, an empire that had stood for centuries collapsed. The story of the fall of Baghdad is not just about a city's destruction. It is about the end of an era, the clash of civilizations, and the terrifying force of history when it turns against the mighty dot. To understand why the fall of Baghdad was so shocking, we must first understand what Baghdad represented. Founded in 762 by the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur, Baghdad quickly grew into one of the greatest cities in the world. Strategically located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, it became a hub of commerce, connecting east and west. But Baghdad was not only wealthy, it was wise. The Abbasid Caliph sponsored scholars, scientists, and artists. The famed House of Wisdom became the greatest library and research center of the medieval world. Greek philosophy, Persian science, Indian mathematics, all were studied, translated, and expanded upon here. Algebra, medicine, astronomy, literature. Baghdad was the beating heart of knowledge. For centuries, it stood as the shining center of the Islamic Golden Age. But by the 13th century, Baghdad's glory had dimmed. The Abbasid Caliphate was a shadow of its former self. The caliphs still held religious prestige as successors to the Prophet Muhammad, but politically their power had waned. Much of the Muslim world was fragmented, ruled by rival dynasties and warlords. While the caliphs lived in relative luxury, their armies were weak, their defenses neglected, and their empire divided. And just beyond their borders, a storm was gathering. That storm was the Mongols. Born on the harsh steppes of Central Asia, the Mongols were a nomadic people forged by hardship. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan in the early 13th century, they erupted out of the steppe and carved out the largest land empire the world had ever seen. Ruthless, disciplined, and terrifyingly efficient, Mongol armies moved with lightning speed, devastating kingdoms from China to Eastern Europe. By the time of Baghdad's fall, Genghis Khan was long dead, but his grandsons carried his vision forward. One of them was Hulagu Khan, tasked with conquering the Islamic heartlands. Hulagu's mission was clear: bring the Abbasid Caliph to heel. At first, he did not necessarily plan to destroy Baghdad. He sent an ultimatum to the Caliph al-Mustasim demanding submission. Many rulers, faced with the Mongols, wisely submitted, paying tribute and avoiding destruction. But al-Mustasim, perhaps overconfident in Baghdad's prestige or misled by poor advisors, refused. He believed that Baghdad's spiritual significance would shield it, that the Muslim world would rally to defend the Caliphate. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Mongols did not fear holy cities, nor did they respect tradition. To them, defiance was an insult that could only be answered with annihilation. In late 1257, Hulagu advanced on Baghdad with a massive army. Estimates vary, but some sources suggest 100,000 to 150,000 Mongol warriors, reinforced by engineers from China skilled in siege warfare. They brought with them siege towers, catapults, and fire weapons technology that few Islamic cities could withstand. The Mongols encircled Baghdad in January 1258. They dug trenches, built siege engines, and cut off all escape. The city was trapped inside Baghdad. Panic spread. The Caliph's forces were poorly organized, perhaps 20,000 men at most, no match for the Mongol horde. Appeals for help went unanswered. Neighboring rulers feared the Mongols too much to intervene. For weeks, the city endured bombardment. Stones and flaming projectiles smashed into its walls and towers. The Tigris echoed with the clash of war drums. Finally, the Mongols breached the defenses. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in human history. On February 10, 1258, Baghdad fell. The Mongols stormed the city and began a massacre that lasted a week. Men, women, and children were slaughtered indiscriminately. Chroniclers speak of hundreds of thousands killed, though exact numbers are impossible to know. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out. Palaces, mosques, and markets were looted and burned. The House of Wisdom, that treasure of human knowledge, was destroyed. Thousands of priceless manuscripts were thrown into the Tigris River. According to legend, the river ran black with ink from the ruined books, and red with the blood of the slain. The Caliph himself, Al-Mustasim, was captured. Unlike other
rulers, he was shown no mercy.
The Mongols, wary of shedding royal blood, reportedly executed him by rolling him in a carpet and trampling him under horses. With his death, the Abbasid Caliphate effectively ended as a political force. Though later caliphs were installed in Cairo by the Mamluks, they held only symbolic authority. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 was the true death of the Abbasid dynasties. The consequences of this catastrophe were immense. Baghdad never fully recovered. The city that had once been the center of the Islamic world was reduced to ruins, its population decimated, its cultural treasures gone. The Islamic Golden Age, already in decline, suffered a blow from which it would not recover. The Mongol invasion marked a turning point in Middle Eastern history, shifting power toward other centers like Cairo and later the Ottoman Empire. And yet, as with all tragedies, the story is not so simple. The Mongols, though destroyers, were also assimilators. In the decades after Baghdad's fall, many Mongols converted to Islam. Hulag's descendants founded the Ilkhanate, which ruled Persia and Iraq. Over time, they rebuilt cities, patronized scholars, and even contributed to Islamic civilization. But the memory of the sack of Baghdad remained, a symbol of devastation. Why did Baghdad fall so completely? The answer lies in a combination of factors: the Abbasids' political weakness, their failure to modernize defenses, the fragmentation of the Muslim world, and the sheer might of the Mongol war machine. Had Al-Mustasim submitted, perhaps Baghdad would have survived as a tributary state. Had Muslim rulers united, perhaps the Mongols could have been resisted. But history is not kind to hesitation and disunity. The fall of Baghdad is a reminder that even the greatest cities can collapse when arrogance blinds leaders and when unity dissolves into division. For centuries, Muslims and historians alike have looked back on 1258 as a symbol of lost glory. It was not just a city that fell, it was a civilization's confidence, a beacon of learning extinguished. Imagine if the House of Wisdom had survived, if its books had been preserved. How much knowledge was lost? How many ideas never reached the future because they were drowned in the Tigris? We can only wonder, and yet history moves on. The Mongols who destroyed Baghdad did not rule forever. Their empire fractured, just as all empires do. But the scar they left on Baghdad and the Islamic world remains. Today, the fall of Baghdad in 1258 still echoes as a warning that even the greatest achievements can be swept away in an instant, that no city, no empire, is too great to fall. So, when we remember Baghdad's fall, we are not only recalling a medieval tragedy, we are reflecting on the fragility of civilizations, on the costs of arrogance and disunity, and on the unstoppable force of change. It is a story that reminds us of a hard truth. History's greatest centers of power can collapse in a single season, undone not only by external enemies but by their own failures. And that is the story of how the City of Peace became the City of Ruins, how the jewel of the Abbasids was lost, and how the Mongols forever changed the course of history.